Today is August 16th, 2022. My name is Blair Williams, and I'm here at the Cumberland County Historical Society with Mr. Lee Goodman and Connie Goodman. So thank you so much for joining me as we have a little chat about St. Patrick's Church here in Carlisle. So the first question I have here for you, Mr. Goodman, is where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Forest Hills, Pennsylvania, which is 12 miles from Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania.
And
I was born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, Fayette County, and I lived there until I came to Carlisle.
okay. The next question I have here, I'll ask you first, Connie, is what were your earliest memories of going to church?
Oh, well, we went to church. We went to church every Sunday. My dad was a collector, very close to the church as far as helping out. But other than that, I went to catechism, of course, at my church in St. Mary's in Uniontown. And I went to summer catechism also, which they had back in those days. And I remember, of course, my first Holy Communion. And let's see, confirmation. And I remember the baptism of my sister. And those are my earliest memories. But I do remember we went to church every Sunday, and holy days, of course. And there were more devotions at that time too. Open devotions at church, and of course, my mother and dad went to those, and I was included. It was a Slovak church, and I do remember I didn't like going to the 10:30 mass because they talked in Slovak, but the other masses were in English, and so those are my earliest memories.
How about you, Mr. Goodman? What were your earliest memories of going to church?
I went to St. Joseph's in Braddock. I went to school there, and that's where my family went to church until I guess the Second World War started. And then we went to a couple different churches, and a lot of times my parents were my dad was a machinist and my mother and a firefighter and taught firefighting and civil defense. So he really, Sunday was the only day he had any time off at all. So sometimes he didn't go to church on Sunday. And so I would go to church myself. They'd give me a little bit of money and to put in the basket, and I would ride the streetcar to church myself. Yeah.
So neither of you grew up attending St. Patrick's Church here in Carlisle. So I'm wondering, what was it like coming to St. Pat's for the first time?
Um, well, we kind of felt out of the league of Carlisle. At that time, Carlisle was not very Catholic, and so we were very welcomed at St. Patrick's. The people were very nice, and we warmed up to the church right away. And of course, the old St. Patrick's was a beautiful church, and we loved it. But that was my first impression of coming to St. Patrick's. It was just coming to Carlisle and going into a new church. And of course, the schools were not, there weren't very many Catholics going to our schools either, as far as teachers and administrators. But we were always welcomed. And yeah, that's.
I came to St. Patrick's. We both went to college together. Well, I was 2 years in front of Fort Connie. And I had a position waiting for me upon graduation teaching here in Carlisle. I was an industrial arts teacher, and I began in 1955. That's when I came to Carlisle. 2 years before Connie came. And she got to the point where it wasn't, sometimes we ran into some anti-Catholicism. I could tell you one, but I don't think you want to repeat it because the superintendent said, Mr. Goodman, the board has elected to hire you, even though you are Catholic.
That would never go over today,
No, I
but
think that would-
yeah, maybe you could eliminate that from that.
But that was the best superintendent he ever had in 40 years at Carlisle. Yeah, he was just a great guy. Really was. Maybe he was just kidding me when he said it. It didn't seem that way, you know. Anyway, got to come to Carlisle, the St. Patrick's Church. It was a worn church inside, I thought. I think it was decorated beautifully. It was too crowded, but, and so of course they were making plans to build a new church, even at that time. What else do I want to say about that, about the church? I think one of the questions is, what were our impressions about them? They were talking about building a new church, but anyway, I could jump ahead several years there because when after Connie and I were here several years, married and had children, we had 5 kids, and well, 4 of them then, I guess. They were talking about building a new church, and we're wondering how we can contribute measurably to this church with 5 kids and on our salary. So anyway, it got built on. By the grace of God, it got built, you know. Let's see.
So, Connie, did you move to Carlisle in 57 or
No, I moved in 59.
59?
Yes, we were married in no, I moved in 58
Okay.
and taught a year at Boiling Springs. And then we were married in 59.
Okay.
So then we moved here together in 59 then. And yes, we weren't married at St. Pat's. We were married at my home church in Uniontown. But we did, as I said, the people were very welcoming. And we did, and especially when we first started having our children, people were very kind and recognized us as a family.
Well, I was wondering, so you moved here separately and then moved here together. Where was your first house together?
My first apartment was on Pitt Street.
Okay.
I can't even remember. It's the white building on the one side of Pitt Street. And I had just a little, very small apartment. And I had a friend drive me to Boiling Springs. I had no car at that time. And Lee lived across the street with a couple of roommates. And but then whenever we were before we were married, we were working on our furniture and so forth for our first apartment. We saw on Northwest Street together, and we would work.
I built some of it.
Yes, and so we would work on our furniture at night, and so our apartment was ready for us when we were married, and yes.
Well, I was just wondering how close you were to the Shrine Church there in East Pomfret.
Yeah, we were close.
Yeah.
I was close, but I didn't walk. Lee would take me to church. He had a car.
And you were also, the high school at that time was where the Moreland development is. Is that
Right.
Yep.
Lamberton building.
Yeah. So you also had a little bit of a commute then as well. Not too bad though.
Not very much, no. Yeah.
Well, so what was attending mass like at the Shrine Church?
I thought it was a warm church, like I said before.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was crowded. There's no speaker system in the church. I don't think there is, no.
Yeah,
I think they must have something.
yeah,
like
they
that
have something now.
because of the photographing of the masses, right? During COVID. Did
They
they
were
do
working on putting something in, but it's very recent.
Yeah, yes, yes. Yeah, I think they're going to do something about that soon. Anyway.
And we would go to early mass generally whenever we didn't go home. We went home a lot of weekends. I was a homebody, so I would go home often.
In all kind of way.
Yeah.
Well, was the Shrine Church similar to your home church then, or back in Uniontown, or?
It was very much like my home. My home church in Uniontown was a big church. It was much bigger than St. Patrick's, but it was decorated and it was the old style,
Yeah.
like St. Patrick's. So that's what made it very comfortable for me to come to church. It was warm, it wasn't cold. It had everything in it that I was used to having whenever I was growing up.
With the exception of the Slovakian.
Yes, except for, yeah, the Slovakian mass, right?
Um, so I guess you've already discussed what role the church played in your daily life, sort of growing up. But what about after you were married and had kids?
We would dress our children every Sunday morning, and um, we would go to mass, even when they were babies. We took them whenever they were babies, and we sat up front so that they could see what's going on. And I think we kept them quiet. But yes, they were used to going to church from being babies. They went to church. We went to church, yes.
And they're very active in their church. I don't know whether you know that.
Well, they will.
They are.
But yes, we took them to church, and we had one we had one 4 in a row. So
You were quite busy.
we were busy. Yes, I was busy, and so was Lee. He worked all the time. It was.
I had a business and I had several businesses.
But Lee built our house too, and so forth. So he worked night and day.
And I did plumbing and heating for people and restorations or renovations, that sort of thing. And then I started a stove business called AES Heating or AES Hearth Place. And for a while, we ran that. We built a barn next to our house, about the size of this room here. No, maybe half the size of this room. And had a showroom in there for the stoves and that sort of thing. Anyway, we had the supplementary income all the time. And by the grace of God, things just seemed to work out for us.
Now, was this in addition to the industrial teaching position, or did that replace it?
Well, I did go back to school again, and
But it was in addition.
yes.
In the early years, yes,
In
it was
addition.
early. He taught for quite a few years while he was doing all this other. Yes,
then I was a counselor for high school too.
that was later, but yeah.
All this time went to grad school too. I don't know.
Well, oh,
I was going to say I only taught my first 2 years that I was married, and then I was at home for 10 years. So I stayed home with the children.
well, the next question I have here is, who are some of the pastors that you remember from St. Pat's?
Father Mattern was our first pastor, but he wasn't here for a very long time. Then it was Father Roberts, and because of our children being young, of course they were baptized and so forth in church, and but we didn't become too close to our pastors at that time because of being busy. But let's see, after Father Roberts was, I'm trying to think.
Well, we had, I have a list of them and they're not in order.
It-
But we had, whenever I first started there, Monsignor Schmidt was, I think he even just went out of being pastor. His sister lived across the street. She was one of our teachers. But he was there too. And Father Mattern, Molesky, Fontanella, Walter Scheid, Forey, Roberts, and McGinley. Those are just some that we could.
Those are our pastors that we had. Yeah.
And did you send your kids to the school at St. Pat's or?
No, whenever our children start reaching the age of school age, St. Pat's was very crowded at that time. The school was crowded. They had large classrooms, you know, and it was a very good school. The sisters taught, and I bet they had like 60 children in a classroom. And when Lee was teaching, he was teaching at the high school at that time. The Bel Air School was there, and they started having kindergarten. So our children would go to school with Lee. They'd go to kindergarten, and the bus would bring them home to where I was. And that was the way they went to school for all of their grade school. So we never did switch to go to Catholic school, which now if I had children, they would all go to Catholic school.
Crowded.
Yeah, but at that time,
Well, now there's also a brand new facility, or I don't know if it's brand new, but a much bigger facility now.
oh yes, and and as I say, it's a good school system, and even back then, whenever it was crowded, I know that the people were very happy with their children going to St. Pat's, and but because I was a teacher, I didn't think that it was having 60 kids in the classroom. I didn't think was that was one of the reasons that we sent him to Catholic school.
So, I'm assuming this next question is going to be more recent in terms of your answer, because you mentioned that you were quite busy, you know, raising kids. But do you have any memories of serving on ministries or communities or helping with CCD?
We helped with CCD a couple of years, confirmation classes, especially whenever our children were in confirmation. And we would teach at the basement of the rectory.
Okay.
And that's where Lee and I taught. And Lee was on he helped with many of the committees. And one of the ones that I remember very distinctly that I thought was a very effective thing that St. Patrick's had. They had a summer fair, and maybe you've heard of this.
That was at
summer
the old
fair.
building.
Yeah.
And it was a community gathering. It was a church gathering. It was children's gathering. It was just wonderful. You know, games and people of the church would volunteer their time, which Lee did a lot with the games and so forth. And that was one of the earliest memories that I remember that I think was a wonderful thing that St. Patrick's had. And but then it went away.
I remember when I spoke with Claire Brem, that was one of her fondest memories too. Was sort of, and she lived on Pomfret Street, so she was right there. But sort of, she mentioned that was sort of the interaction between the church and the community was really apparent during those summer festivals.
It was. And she was really a worker. Now she had young children too.
Yeah.
But she worked in the kitchen. She was a really I wasn't as forward. Claire was she was very outgoing, she was good. She was a good servant.
I was involved in the building committee for the parish activity center and served for 16 years on the I wrote them down here because
No.
What you wanted to go.
You.
I was on the Diocesan Financial Advisory Board for 16 years in the Ministry of, that was a Minister of Holy Communion. Since probably, I thought I put it down here, I think it's about 1964. That was about 2 years after they first established that. And I was Minister of Holy Communion to nursing homes and a hospital. For those, I was a Eucharistic as a visitor. And of course, Connie mentioned we were on CCDB. I did for things, to build things or put things together for the church or the rectory, different times that they need things. That's, for example, those lights, the lights that we have in our new church with their clear cones or their opaque cones.
Yeah.
There used to be 3 other cones around each one of those. One was purple, one was orange, one was green. It just wasn't church-like.
Yeah.
So I designed the wooden pieces that go around those and took the place of those things there and put those up. And also after remember the bishop was there and he fell down the steps,
I don't recall that.
ruined his knee or something. Yeah. I designed and put up the railing then.
Oh, for shrine?
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
it
not
was
the
in
shrine
Antioch or
church.
something.
Not the shrine. Let's see.
No, it wasn't a show.
No, it wasn't shrine church. But I did I always think I did something for her on the altar of the new church too. And I just put a peg up there. That's right. Father Molinsky had a hard time getting up there. Anyway. I put the railings up so in the new church there so that it would be safe to get up and down. Anyway, I'm sorry. Take it there.
No. That's what we're here for stories. So, well, so do you remember any individuals, or Connie? Do you remember him talking about anyone from his time serving on these committees?
I remember people that we were belonged to organizations with that were beautiful people. I don't know if anybody had ever mentioned the Karloviches, Ed Karlovich and Barb Karlovich. She was a beautiful lady. They had a large family, and we served on, it was called Christian Family Movement. And that was an early organization, and we belonged to that. And we belonged to it with a lot of people that were here before, that were older than we are, that had older children, but we got into their group. And it was the Fowlers and Karloviches and, oh goodness, trying to think. But anyway, they were the people that I remember. And as far as Lee working on committees with people, oh my goodness, dear. I'm trying to think of who you worked on committees
Peg
with.
Burns with the
Oh, Peg Burns, yes. She was with the communion thing, yeah.
and I have down here Link Warrell.
Yeah.
That was with the Diocesan Financial Advisory Committee. And then also Barb Karlovich again, I mentioned.
Yeah. And we did join the other organizations that the church started. We had the
You mean Bible study?
well, Bible study, but then the faith groups they started. I can't remember when, but remember they divided all the people up into to join certain faith groups. Well, we belong to that, and to this day we have a faith group that.
Because of COVID is not working very well.
But it kind of dropped by the wayside. But
two people have died.
We still have a group, a faith group, which I think was a good thing that the church had, because you get to know people in your group, and you're able to discuss your faith and your home life and whatever's going on or problems. And so we we did continue with that because the group we had enjoyed it. But some people fell away, and some people we had to add.
Well, this isn't a question that was on the sheet, but you mentioned COVID. I'm just wondering how has COVID, I guess, impacted your relationship with the church the last couple of years?
Since we were older,
Yep.
we did stay away from church maybe longer than other people, but we'd watch mass every morning, and we sometimes watched St. Patrick's Mass, but we also watched mass with our son. He has a church in Harrisburg, so we would watch Lee every morning. And that's what we did. Yeah, for COVID. But we did that, I think, for 2 years. Until then, they started going back to church. And we were slow to go back because we were afraid, because we were older. And but we did. We started going back. And it's sad because there are a lot of people we don't see. It's not as close relationship with people of the church because we don't see the same people all the time. But
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I sing
yeah,
in our music ministry. I sing at 5 o'clock mass. It's more the
contemporary.
modern Christian music that we sing. And it's fun. I like to sing. Been singing. I was in the barber shop for 25 years. Yeah.
Well, I'll just I know when I Claire, she was the opposite. She was she was very eager to go back, and I'm just wondering, what was it like that first time back in church?
The first time back
Yeah,
was strange.
was it?
Yes, it was strange. And after 2 years, people changed.
Yeah.
Hair got gray, wearing masks. I felt it was hard to recognize people. And it was even a little scary, going back and seeing people that you hadn't seen for a long time. And of course, then it was a standoffish thing too. People didn't hang around and talk. And that is something you miss when you're going to mass, seeing people and standing around and talking, and I missed that part of going back to church.
Well,
Now Claire went to daily mass all the time,
yeah.
and we went to daily mass before COVID, but then we stopped going to early mass.
Well, Murray, you mentioned that your son has a church in Harrisburg.
Yes.
So, do you know what was his decision to follow that path?
Lee was our middle child.
Okay.
And it'd be nice if Lee would be here too for this. But Lee, my dad always said that he wanted his grandchildren to be priests. I mean, you're going to be a priest. You're going to be all three of them. And anyway, Lee hung on to a pair of rosaries that my mother gave him when he was a little guy. She gave him a pair of rosaries that were in a Mary statue, and the Marys glowed in the dark, the rosaries. And to this day, he has those rosaries, and he thinks of Grandma. And but him becoming a priest, he went to Penn State, and it was his. And in the summertime, he and our older son would worked at the boat docks in South Carolina, the oil rigs, and that's where they got their summer job and made money because they had to pay for their college, and that's where they made money for their college. And between Lee's a junior and senior year, he took off a year, and he said he was going to work for that whole year and then go back to school. Well, he took with him a load of books on every religion you can think of. And of course, the Catholic religion too. And he belonged to the Newman Club at Penn State when he was there. And he was dating a girl that was a lovely girl. And if she would have been any of if we would have been able to choose any of our daughter-in-laws, she would have been one of them. She was lovely. And they, of course, belonged to Newman Club together. And I think at that time, Lee must have been telling Christine that he was thinking of being a priest. But anyway, he took off that summer. And this goes on to another part. Lee was on a retreat, and our son, young Lee, was on the same retreat. And at that retreat, one of the main speakers did not show up.
It was bad weather.
With bad weather. So I don't know how they got Lee, our son, to talk. But anyway, he talked in front of the group, and that's when Lee found out that he was going to be a priest.
Kenny mentioned he had a meeting with a bishop.
Yeah. And so,
or something.
and we were, of course, we were delighted, we thought that was, so he came home and said that's what he wanted to do. And he told Christine that that's what he was going to do. And that's what he did. He finished his senior year and then went to seminary. But that's kind of like his story that.
Well, I mean, obviously, probably, I'm sure growing up, sitting in the front of the church, probably had, and then his gift from his grandmother. It's interesting how those choices or decisions and influences that up.
Of course, they always said night prayers too before they went to bed.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we made sure that.
Did you gather everyone around a single bed or individual beds?
When they were young, until they were in maybe junior high school. Yeah, we would say night prayers together. And of course, we said prayers before eating. We didn't say prayers after eating. We just never got into that, but we did say them before.
We spoke with Jack Griffith a couple weeks ago, and he said growing up, his entire family would, every night gather around the bed and say prayers. So.
Yeah, we'd kneel down and say the prayers. Yeah, we did that. And whenever they got older, the last thing we said, whenever they kissed us goodnight, we said, "Don't forget to say your prayers." That was so. And I think I know they had their children do them whenever they were young too.
Well, you mentioned that when you first came to Carlisle, this area was not very Catholic. And I'm wondering what changes you've noticed over the years since you came in 55 and Connie, you came in 58, both to the community and the church.
I found that the community is very welcoming. Lee joined more organizations in the community, so he would know that he was accepted, and there wasn't any deference.
No, but I guess what I'm asking is, I think the Catholic community has grown quite a bit.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, with that, obviously the church is, there's still a church on East Pomfret, but now there's a larger church on Marsh Drive. So there's a new building, there's new schools. So I guess I'm wondering, were there any other changes over the years that stood out to you? Aside from those, I guess, physical changes.
Yeah. I think more Catholics got involved in community.
I think they were more accepted. Yeah.
And I think that, I'm sorry, that's all I could.
Wouldn't want to make that a big issue. No, I don't think that's really an issue.
Well, I think obviously if there are more Catholics in the community, it makes sense that they're also more involved too, just as a percentage of the population.
There are a whole lot more people in Carlisle.
Yeah.
A whole lot more people in Carlisle than there were in 1955. And I won't say, I would say that this church has not grown exponentially or in relation to that same
Okay.
growth. I don't think it is that much. Do you?
No, I don't think so either. It has
Of course,
grown, but
all churches, I think, would say the same thing today. So many churches, not all churches, but so many churches would say the same thing. They're not getting, well, some of our Protestant churches have gone together so that they have more response, But anyway,
I think COVID has done a lot to, yeah, I think it stopped a lot of people from thinking the church was important. That's just that's just the way I feel. And I think it was hard on the children.
I think families have changed too. There's a big change in when we see that in the behavior of our school kids today. We're losing teachers.
Well, you referenced the summer fairs that used to be put on East Pomfret, and I'm wondering, were there any other issues or events that you remember the church being involved with the community?
Let's see. Now I know funerals. The church was involved in making dinners for families. But that was within the church. But I think that is another thing that the church did for people to have the dinners for the funeral for after mass. I think that was a good thing. And I think all the visits that are made to the nursing homes, I think our church really participates a lot in visiting nursing homes.
And Mr. Goodman, you said that was one of the ministries that you served with. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you a Eucharistic minister at the nursing home, or was it just a visiting ministry? Or
No, I was a Eucharistic minister, yeah. And then I also served as a Eucharistic minister at the church too, for some periods of time, but I didn't do that all the time.
And you also read.
Yeah, I was also a lector.
He was a lector.
Usually for the daily masses, sometimes for Sunday masses, but not frequently at all.
that's why you knew that there wasn't a sound system.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, I would say, Lee, speak louder. We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Well, the last few questions I have are what I think of as like the metaphysical questions. But the first one is, and I'll ask you first, Connie. Do you remember when faith played a particularly important role in your life?
Oh my goodness. Well, because the way I was raised, even whenever I was going with Lee, faith was a very important part because Lee was away a lot, and church was very important to me at that time at college, and then of course with our children being baptized and all of their involvement really was very meaningful to me. And they were, and I think Lee said this, that they all got involved in church, which makes us, we're pleased. They all in some way either taught CCD and even now, and they work with youth. They all did. And
Ask me that question.
All right. So, Mr. Goodman, do you recall a time when faith played a particularly important role in your life?
I know what you're going to say.
You know it. You heard it many, many times.
I know, not me too, Lee. That's, I know. And I was going to say that. Go ahead.
When I was just a little kid in first and second grade at St. Joseph's in Braddock, the nuns taught us out of Baltimore Catechism that why God make you, he made you to know him, to love him and serve him in this world, and be happy with him forever in the next. And I see you sit shaking your head. You remember that, yeah. And I thought, well, okay. And then I went to a very poor grade school. No, junior high school, very poor. And my faith didn't mean a whole lot to me. I'd say for just those 2 years, 8th and 9th grade, or 7th and 8th grade, yeah. Didn't think too much about it. However, I was confirmed at that time, and there was a priest that came to our public school and held the confirmation classes. How about that? See that today? Anyway, but the school was terrible. Then I went to St. Vincent Prep in Latrobe, and there I learned that a lot more about my faith, you know. And I also learned that whenever I get married, this is the person that's going to be my ticket to heaven.
But Lee always said, Connie, don't worry about it. It's all in God's hands.
That's a story that you've heard quite a few times over the years.
Yes, quite a
That's
few
beautiful.
times. Yeah.
The last question I have on this list here is just, and it's similar, and I think in many ways, but just how has your faith, your faith journey influenced your life over the years?
How has it influenced me?
Yep.
Oh. In every serious decision, or how has it influenced? I'd say in every way.
That's usually the answer I've gotten. So,
Yeah. You had some questions there about military service. I only taught at Carlisle for 1 year, and I was drafted.
okay.
Yeah, and so I served 2 years, and I was I worked at the military district headquarters in Tennessee, and I was a chaplain's assistant, but there was no chaplain there. But I organized the activities of the chaplains in the state of Tennessee. Or were they reserve chaplains, that sort of thing.
This was in 56.
Yeah, I was drafted in 56, 57, 58 I came home.
Okay.
That's when Glenn moved to Carlisle. Yeah.
All right.
She was still in college.
Yeah, no, yeah. I remember you saying you were 2 years ahead of her, so that's why I initially asked if she moved here in 57. But that makes sense if you were in Tennessee. Wish would have waited a year.
I didn't get to see much of her, I can tell you that.
Well, this is a story that we were together 6 years. I mean, we knew each other for 6 years before we were married. And on the 5th year, Lee went to my parents and wanted to get engaged. And my mother said no. Connie won't finish college if she gets engaged, or she'll get married and she won't finish college. And so we showed mother.
You got engaged anyway.
Well, no, we waited.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wait.
we waited, and I taught 2 years. And I was a first generation college, so yeah. But Lee waited for me.
Oh, yes.
You mentioned you went to St. Vincent's Prepley. Did you matriculate to St. Vincent's, or did you go to another college?
Well, St. Vincent College at that time had a prep school 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started there in 9th grade.
Yep.
Was there for 4 years.
But is that where you went to college as well?
No, we both went to California, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
No.
Is that where you met?
That's right.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I should ask too, how did you meet at California?
Newman Club.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I was organizing a Newman Club at Carlisle, rather at the college. They didn't have one. And it seemed like yeah, tell us. Every time I needed help.
Yeah.
And I knew how to make potato salad.
Oh, girl.
Big parts of potato salad.
And that's what drew everyone in, was the free food.
Yeah. Newman Club picnic or whatever it was.
Well, Connie, I should ask you as well how, and you might have a very similar answer, but I'm just wondering, how has your faith journey influenced your life over the years?
In every way. The first thing we do is pray. That's when we're worried about, well, I worry, Lee tells me not to worry, but when I worry about something, first thing we do is pray. And of course, we're worried about our grandchildren. It's influenced us as much, even more so with them, because we're not being able to puppet them. We were able to, but yeah, and we pray for them. It's influenced everything we do. And the older we get,
More so.
more so.
Do you pray together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We say the rosary each day together.
Morning prayers, night prayers.
Those are all the questions that I had.
Good.
Well, as I said, the only thing I usually end by asking is Is there anything else you want to mention or anything I should have asked that I didn't?
No, we talked enough anyway.
All right.
I've never talked to anybody like that before.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming in and sharing some stories about your life in St. Pat's and the Carlisle and Carlisle County community. As I always say, this is the best part of my job, and it's all the more so today. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, thank you
And
for,
sharing your relationship. It's a beautiful thing to see.
thank you.
Thank you.